what I wanted to get from you, Dave, right up top, and we're already into it a little bit, is the vibe. What is the vibe of the American voter right now? And to start off, I want to quote a tweet or an image from MSNBC that I saw pictured on Twitter from at Good Politics Guy, an MSNBC screenshot saying in all caps, midterms issues for Democrats were, quote, censoring conservative voices on social media, quote, college campuses becoming liberal echo chambers, quote, the push to be politically correct, and, quote, canceling historical figures. Are these the kitchen table issues on the road right now?
Not all of that, really. This is one thing you get from going around the country is that do you meet people who are obsessed with stuff that maybe doesn't affect their material concerns, like obviously all the time, but that goes both ways. There's, very wealthy people whose kids are going to private school who love Ibram Kendi, and there's very wealthy, hot tub salesmen who are terrified of something being canceled that hasn't been canceled. That happens, but it has all been about, one, stuff costs more, two, the president's pretty old. I'm not sure I'm speaking the voice of the American voter. I'm not sure this old guy can handle it. It's basically like a theme of the election when I boil down what I find, which is after, not to make the whole thing about Afghanistan. After Afghanistan, people looked at Biden, and whether or not they agreed with what happened, the decision to get out, most people agree with that. They thought, I'm not sure if this guy is on the ball in a crisis, and that has just kind of run through everything.
I don't understand the living skeleton man who is trapped in a prison of nostalgia and 50-year-old memories, who can't seem to indicate any awareness of his surroundings at any given moment. He doesn't inspire confidence.
Who is increasingly taken to shaking hands with ghosts after speeches.
Oh, I saw that video. I think he was doing the politician thing where you go like, oh, you're putting your hands out. But he does. They don't. There's no one in the White House who says, let's say I'm a big guy. If somebody's giving me a speech for me, I'd say, hey, don't have me wear a white bodysuit because I wouldn't look as good as I might look in like a good clean cut. And there's no one in the White House who's like, hey, there are a lot of memes out there about the president being old and out of it. We should minimize the times when he looks old and out of it. That doesn't really happen because some of this is unfair, but they also just kind of let him roll. And I don't think letting him roll is the way to go. With his, he's still like the whole dementia thing. I've met people with dementia. I don't think he's one of them. I think he's an old guy, which is a legit thing. We know lots of them. They're not all that they used to be. I feel like that shouldn't be that controversial of a take. Certainly, it isn't here.
What's so wild is how that his energy and his presence is matched by, at least according to what you read in the papers from people who get inside sources, matched by his administration, the lack of urgency, right? Like that's what people around the party, like in the legislature and stuff, keep saying, right? It's like they're yelling at these people at the White House about what's going on and how things are being perceived, and they're just not doing anything, which is the very opposite of the O'Bungler era, where they were like febrile, fast twitch muscles going crazy. Like every news cycle, they were there with something, and they were just tacking to public opinion frantically all through those 8 years. Whereas they seem to just have, I don't know, like that WikiHow drawing, accept your death, or you're looking at the plant. Seems like that's everyone in the White House.
And Democrats running for Congress, like you get talking to them, and you can always tell when somebody's saying something because they'd rather say something else, but they can't. And that's why I mentioned Biden, but also when they talk about their agenda not passing, they just can't keep saying it'd be much easier if Joe Manchin let us pass this bill so we could go back and say, remember that stuff we did it, and they haven't. So I'm a very minimalist when I come to the midterms. I don't think it's bending that much based on one piece of news or another. I think you even see news cycles, right, that are one poll shows Biden up a little. Is this going to help him? There's a Supreme Court nominee. Is this going to help him? I know it's just that they ran on a lot of stuff, and I think their base, Democratic base, the coalition they built, which is a very weird coalition, notices more if something doesn't happen. And I'm not trying to be demeaning to conservatives, but the conservatives, when they're in power, demand a lot of stuff that's pretty easy to do. Like, hey, I put a commission together, and we're going to teach John Tremaine in school again instead of how to be anti-racist. Like that was just Trump signed something with a pen. They're like, that's amazing. Whereas Democrats are like, hey, we were getting a great tax credit. Where is it? And Democrats are like, you should be worried about January 6th. And I feel like that doesn't work. Just their voters need need when they're in power to have resources redistributed to them. That's why they voted for him. And when that doesn't happen, things get crazy. Although it keeps happening, doesn't it? This is the third time in a row this has happened.
Mm-hmm. So on the Democratic voter side, I mean, we're seeing a lot in the last few weeks about the just horrible portents of the collapsing Biden approval rating, even among potential voters, among likely voters. On the Democratic side, are you hearing a lot of people who would be traditional Democratic voters who their skepticism, their disappointment, their lack of feeling fulfilled by the Biden administration affecting being the number one principle that they're voting on this year?
They're actually more engaged than you'd think when you lay it out like that, or even the way I was talking about it. So one thing that happened, I mean, their electorate got more college educated, more PMC, less white working class. A problem for them has always been, oh gosh, our white working class voters just the ones we have left don't vote in midterms if they're unhappy, and we don't have anyone else to make up for it. They do now. They have. Well, I mean, the education gap is nuts. Go back and look at polling when Obama was running. There was no education gap. It's like 30 points now. Those voters do vote. So you look at something like Virginia, where the last 2 months of that campaign are garbage time, where Democrats can't do anything right. And they only lose by 2.5 points. And that's a state where they lost under Obama by 20. So, and if you look at the map, it's like, well, all right, we're getting destroyed everywhere that has like a Sheetz no, really those kind of places everywhere where like the gas station there's a
where you can get a hoagie at the gas station,
where there's a memorial, there's something that got turned into an Instagram experience that used to employ people, all the things that make up rural America, worse than ever, but they still have those suburbs. And if you talk to Republicans, they're like, well, that will mitigate some of these losses. Like we're not going to, maybe we can't flip Portland anymore. Or, Bush could compete in some suburbs that we're so hated because of Trump that we're not going to, and this is Republicans, but we don't need to. So I think the Democrats have more money and more excitement than they did other times when they've been in really bad shape. It's all relative. Like this time, 2010, even though the president was more popular, just their voters did not care. We're not going to show up, and we're not giving money.
Well, then I would like to turn to the flip side, which is the vibe among the Republican voters. And I guess along the lines of what you were just saying, I guess the conventional wisdom, especially if you're just scrolling Twitter, is that the Democrats are going to get creamed in the midterms, just based, again, as I was saying earlier, and you kind of put some nuance on of the Biden polling numbers. But is this going as well for the GOP as it might seem at first glance? One thing that I saw that I thought was interesting were the results from recent elections in Wisconsin about school boards, where a lot of these people running on real hardcore GOP school board censorship, anti-LGBT shit, did not quite go as well as they thought. This is from the Wisconsin Examiner. In Eau Claire, all three board candidates who ran on anti-LGBT platforms lost to the incumbents and their allies. The three conservative candidates stoked controversy about a teacher training program they claimed excluded parents from conversations about their child's gender and identity and sexual orientation. This became a topic on Fox News. They all lost. Similar results in Beloit, La Crosse, even I think in Green Bay. So are these issues that the GOP is trying to make a cornerstone, the things that I referenced from that MSNBC tweet earlier, are they playing as well as they could be, or the GOP wants them to?
I'm glad you brought up Wisconsin, because they have underperformed in some of those places where the trends are going their way. Their big coup in Wisconsin that day was they won the Kenosha executive, which was Kenosha. There has been a backlash to the riot there in 2020. They pulled that off, and they won this judicial seat, which it's just drawn to be pretty Republican. So they won that. But you're right, it was pretty mixed. I'd say if probably 6 months ago or before Afghanistan, I was more bullish on Democrats having an okay midterm, just because all these things we're talking about now, they're not really actionable. They're not a thing. Like no member of Congress, no Democratic member of Congress is coming home and saying, "I'm going to teach your kids. I'm going to put all these explicit books in school because I know it freaks you out." They're not really doing it. So you had conservative activism focused on stuff that the real hardcore ideologues were interested in. And that's still the case. And that's not where most voters are. It's just that voters can be convinced, if something's happening that's so crazy that nothing works anymore. So the school's less good than it used to be, and the dollar's worth less than it used to be. It needs to be connected to something. Mm-hmm. There aren't really people turning out and saying, I used to be a Democrat, but I'm so angry that a teacher who's gay had a TikTok saying she was gay. That stuff does feel like people who, I mean, like Chris Rufo and some other people who had incredible success in the anti-CRT thing are kind of trying to get into a side gig and make it about that. I don't think that's clicked quite as much yet. It's all the other stuff. I mean, if that was happening in a environment where the economy was like what it was in summer 2019, I don't know if it would be connecting the same way, because everybody, as soon as anybody wins anything, they're like, well, that's what did it. All of my pet issue is the reason that we won this thing. Like Virginia's another good example. You go back and look at the data. It wasn't that a bunch of parents were so angry that they switched over. The electorate was just a lot more white and rural than it usually is. Those guys who vote for Trump and nobody else could be convinced to vote for Youngkin. That's the moment. News cycles change. What really scared the Democrats I cover is thinking, oh, well, we have a better electorate that we used to that turns out, but they have an even better one. And their one is motivated on stuff we're not doing. Like, no, they're going home and saying, here's the money I brought back for the bridge. And the question that like the Fox News viewer is getting is like, what are you doing about the pedo tunnels under Disney? Which is a literal thing people have brought up to me when I've been talking to them. And so that's where it's so confusing them. It's like the Republicans are chasing something that's probably not where most people's heads are at, but they're angry enough about other stuff that they're willing to go along with it. And then they say, oh, the lesson of this is we're the school book restricting movement right now. Yeah, and could you think of a better issue to like motivate that PMC person at home who doesn't have that much skin in the game? Like the idea that the school somewhere is going to ban Toni Morrison. I mean, it is. There's a lot of these issues where Democrats are just kind of trapped in a room with Republicans, and they want to win the argument. It's not clear that anyone cares. Anyone who could be persuaded cares. The people who are persuaded were like, "Could you shut up and make it so that like I have a child tax credit again?"
Do you have any takes on that, Matt?
Well, that raises the interesting question. So the Republicans are, as the losing party for the last election and midterm, usually are more motivated. Mm-hmm. The economic headwinds, as they like to say, are pushing against the incumbents. But the other big thing that's suggestive of a wipeout is this huge collapse in Biden's approval among younger people. Mm-hmm. This possibility of just a massive, not switch to Republicans, but rather just a decision to stay home. And the question is, does the fact that the Republicans plan for keeping their base whipped up involve pressing all of the most sensitive culture war buttons that young people do, the young Democrats anyway, are committed to? Will that be enough to get them to overcome their disappointment and resentment of Brandon and the Democrats, and to imagine that there are stakes enough to vote in the midterm? And I don't know. I'm not sure.
I don't know.
The Republicans do love overplaying their hands.
Oh, yeah, and they think that they're winning. I mean, a lot of the trans politics is, it's not that they think we found a great thing on the floor and we're upset. It's that they think we can, if we freak people out about everyone becoming low T and transgender, then we're going to get a lot of votes. That's the thought behind it. But you're right. That's not really where everybody's head is at the moment. I do think that helps a lot of people I'm talking about motivate themselves to turn out like, Biden's not in the ballot. I don't want these people to win. I mean, that was the whole McAuliffe campaign at the end, was, do you really want these people to win? And it failed, but it failed, again, less miserably than what they've done in the past. So
which might point towards what Felix said a couple episodes ago. They lose the House and Senate for no other reason than they don't really have any leeway there. So they're likely to lose the Senate and the House if there's any partisan Republican edge to the electorate, or to the outcome anyway. But that won't be a complete annihilation. And would you think that would you say, I don't like to do predictions, but I'm happy to ask you to do predictions right now. Does it feel to you more like a wipeout is coming, or a more middle of the bell curve, sort of pro opposition party midterm?
I think it would be a wipeout if Republicans got out of their way, and in some places they are. I mean, I feel that there's stuff that went Democratic by 10, 15 points that will be in play just because of enough voters are switching over, and which kind of voters are they? So if there's a district that's like there's one Colorado 7th district. Watch this flip, and I look stupid. But that one's just like everyone there has a college degree, basically. And Republicans are saying we're going to compete for it, but it's really tough. And then there are seats where, like in Nevada, where the electorate is Hispanic and white voters without college degrees, and those groups are both like done with this. So I feel like there's going to be potential wipeouts in places that were drawn to be safe for Democrats because of who is voting. I hate using let's not do this. Let's not do the Weigel thing where it's like, well, if it was held today. I just feel like that trend has been happening for a year. So if the people who, if the electorate looks like 2014, that was a really small one, even they'd be losing differently than they would lose this under this electorate. There's a lot of people who were fine with voting Democratic until like 6 months ago, but they live in different kinds of places. I mean, even this Florida electoral map that they're trying to finish up is getting attention because the rest of the redistricting was not that great for Republicans. A combination of lawsuits and just there's so many suburbanites who don't want to vote Republican that there's not that much more they can gain. Like if you push them, they're like, yeah, on the current map, there's maybe 15 seats we should be able to flip. But if things get really crazy, we're going to be competing for, the deep blue place that, nobody had bothered spending money in that moved 30 points toward Biden. They think those could be in play because the Biden coalition is weird. I said that before. It's probably a better word. It is like everyone from most DSA members to Bill Kristol, and they want different stuff. Like it is really like, I'm going to suck it down and vote for, and a lot of those people are, I'm going to suck it up and vote for Joe Biden, who I don't love. There are people who he's more liked than Hillary Clinton was for lots of reasons. But there are a lot of voters who were like, I voted for him to get Trump out. Things are still bad. I'm tuning out everything, and maybe I'll tune back in and vote Democratic because if I see that Stephen Colbert that night and he scares me, maybe I'll vote. Not a very edifying election. That's where I see people talking.
It also strikes me when there's, when people are writing a lot about this kind of historic collapse of young people's enthusiasm in the Democratic coalition, how much that suck it up and vote for me was the explicit pitch of the Biden campaign of being like, basically like, you don't like me, I don't like you, but everybody has to get in the van to do this one thing. And now the one thing's done. And I mean, that was the statement from the beginning. So it's like, it shouldn't.
Their argument, like, it is very funny watching people get mad at the young people for checking out because, like, what Biden's explicit pitch to people was, "I am the status quo. You will not get what you want, but that's okay because we have this bigger mission. But you know what? When the election's over, we'll discuss it.
Yeah.
Like we'll see. Your parents saying we'll see. Well, you got home and you found out what many kids do, that we'll see means no." We'll see always means no. They're just trying to shine you on. And so this is absolutely predictable. And if you do believe that Biden is constrained and can't do the things that these people want him to do, then getting mad at them for feeling that way to me is absolutely baffling.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're essentially asking them to just act like you're your parents, essentially. Like pretend you own a home.
Yeah.
But most, it's like, I'm sorry, I am who I am. I have student loan debt and I have, a precarious life situation. And there's these things that I imagine this guy could do. And this stuff that his predecessor was doing that they're now being cut off. And we're being told, like, accept this. It's like, yes, if you are a secure Democrat, the people who really pushed Biden over, the people who didn't want to die of COVID, and so voted for Biden over Trump, for them, this is not a big deal. This is not a reason to not do your duty to vote for the Democrats. But they're young people. By definition, they vote less. They're supposed to care about politics less because they're supposed to be having fun.